This is Speak of the Devils on AZ Family Sports.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier TV show for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV and CBS 5.
And I'm Joe Healey with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, we are at the halfway point of the season, but these last few weeks feel like very much like a rinse-repeat type of situation. The Sun Devils doing just enough to win, playing well on pretty much, and we saw some improvement on the offensive side of the ball, but again, doing just enough to not take home the W.
So ASU is here at the bye week at the true midway point of the season. As you mentioned, there have been maybe some small incremental improvements over the course of the season, but it is what it is. ASU is 1-5 to start this 2023 season. And as you mentioned, most emphatically shown against Colorado in a game that ASU realistically should have won. And there haven't been too many cases where you could say that this year. Did enough to win the game, but just enough, even if it's just really one true play that was the difference maker, that created a loss that could have been a resounding win for ASU.
Yeah, we're starting to see some trends really kind of define this early part of the 2023 season. And as we kind of evaluate things here at the halfway point, looking back just as specifically at last Saturday's kind of big time matchup against Colorado, obviously a lot of hype coming around this Buffalo team and head coach Deion Sanders. And ASU was really kind of in control for a lot of the game. The defense, again, played very well, held that potent Buffalo offense pretty much in check all game long. The offense responded with a 94-yard drive that was pretty impressive, Joe, near at the end to get the game-tying score. But then, as they have in the last couple of weeks, they've gotten to that precipice of victory, but then ultimately just done one thing that derails everything. In this case, it was allowing a big-time pass play on Colorado's drive that had just under a minute left to go, put them immediately in field goal range, and just unfortunately the rest is history.
Yeah, you kind of had a feeling about it. Even when that exciting touchdown was scored by ASU to tie the game, it's just sometimes the Sun Devil way that when anything can happen, it may happen. And that's exactly what happened with ASU, allowing one very long play. Maybe I'm kind of overthinking this, but it flashed me back to that Matt Leinart to, I think, Dwayne Jarrett against Notre Dame 2005, the Bush push game. Again, that was like one of the biggest games in recent college football regular season history. Not quite as much magnitude on this one, but it just reminded me a little bit of that, and it ultimately led to a Sun Devil loss.
Yeah, so, we're quickly breaking down kind of the offensive defense in the game, Joe. Trenton Bourguet got the start yet again. Of course, ASU's quarterback position has been banged up throughout the year, but now they've had some consistency with Bourguet getting consecutive starts, again, threw for over 300 yards on the day. And as mentioned, the 94-yard drive that was really kind of instrumental. ASU was able to tie the game, and it was kind of a clutch time. And after we saw last week against Cal, the inability of the offense to kind of have that last chance that the defense gave them. But this time, methodically drove the ball down the field. Nice 30-yard connection with Elijah Badger, who had another huge game, a career day. And then Troy O'Meary was hauled in the kind of jump ball touchdown to tie the game. Big time drive, big time response. I know that we've been high on Bourguet generally. He's battled this season, and then seen a guy like Troy O'Meary coming off kind of the doghouse a little bit early in the year. Good signs, but ultimately also big kind of question there, Joe. In this kind of season of just kind of Kenny going for and being a little aggressive, caution to the wind, would you have gone for two?
I didn't want to in that circumstance, quite frankly, because I had enough faith in the defense, and ASU had a lot on its side. The crowd was on its side. I mean, it took that one long back-breaking play. I guess credit to Colorado. I was thinking that they might just kneel it and go into overtime or be cautious, at least, maybe conservative with their play calling. It worked out for them, could have worked against them. So for me, in that kind of circumstance, I like the call that they made. Again, it would have been any one of those hindsight is 2020 situations where if you go for it and you get it, you look like a genius. Honestly, in all reality there, what it would really have added up to, because they still got a field goal, right? I mean, you wouldn't have been up by 3 points. So had you gotten that, doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the world if the game plays out the same way it did with those final few minutes.
Yeah, some Sunday morning quarterback in there. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, the defense gave up a back-breaking play right off the bat on Colorado's ensuing drive that put them immediately in field goal position. And to that point, the defense had played a really heck of a good game. Even just the final numbers are still pretty good, holding Colorado well below their season averages. The pass rush, as we've talked about in recent weeks, has really continued to be very strong. Probably the strongest single element of this Sun Devil team so far. Prince Dorba, another monster game coming in relief opposite for Clayton Smith, opposite BJ Green, who also had another big game. Those two edges have really been a disruptive force. Overall, the Sun Devil defense, despite some notable injuries, continues to get the job done, but unfortunately kind of a script flip, so to speak. they were the ones this week that had the back-breaking mistake that ultimately cost the Sun Devils a win.
Yeah, sometimes it can be really just one play that decides the outcome of the game, and that one long pass play really was it for this. So it was really a back-breaking event for ASU to have to endure. But just like you're talking about, there are some bright spots on defense, especially Prince Dorba. I'd say if you were to talk about we're going to be giving out awards during our podcast and things like that, but the surprise breakout player, something like that, I would have to put him, high atop that list, if not at the very top of it, with what not only he did against Colorado, but the sparks that he's shown throughout the year so far as well.
Yeah, and I think overall it was another encouraging step forward because the defense, outside of that one kind of back-breaking play, played pretty well and put ASU in a position to win. The offense still very banged up. The offensive line is continuing to be ravaged by injuries. This bye week kind of comes at a really good time, so maybe they get some help in the trenches there. But the playmakers continue to make a little bit more plays. Elijah Badger had a career day with 12 receptions on the day, showing why he's one of the Pac-12's best. So you're seeing some incremental gains, Joe, but just ultimately, as Kenny keeps saying, like, this is a team that needs to learn how to win and kind of finally get over the hump. That he feels that they're close, but just and that one time, once they get that thing to finally click, the win should start coming quickly. But simply put, they're not there yet.
And I think there'd be a lot greater encouragement among the fan base if the conference weren't as strong this year and if ASU's remaining schedule weren't as difficult as it is. If you could get these even close losses, if they were against, say, more competitive teams, more specifically like the USC loss, and you can look at, okay, when Cal's further down on the schedule or Colorado's further down on the schedule, that'll be a good thing. I think there are a lot of people that think that ASU might not have too many real opportunities to win games, and the last couple weeks have been very winnable. So I think that's where, among other things, some frustration comes from.
So after the break, we're going to take a kind of a stock of this team at the halfway point. 6 games left to go in this 2012 season. We'll dive into some of the things that we've seen so far, some of the things that line ahead, and talk to some special guests. Welcome back to Speak of the Devils. Now, this being the bye week, over on the main podcast feed, it was time for our annual mid-season report cards, where we kind of go position by position, even grade the coaching staff as to how they perform over the first half of the season.
Yeah, but it's difficult to grade this team. A lot of factors, a lot of things on the exterior, but we had to bring in 2 of the GOATs, our guy Chilly. Not too many people are as tapped into the local recruiting scene as he is, and our guy, Hod Rabino from devilsdigest.com. You want to talk about dialed in? He's as dialed in as it gets. They're going to help us give some grades to this coaching staff, which, again, it's a difficult thing to evaluate because there's so much going on this season, but we got to call it like it is. So we're going to jump into those evaluations right now.
All right, so now it's time to dive into the coaching staff here. And, of course, first-year head coach Kenny Dillingham is kind of learning on the job, a little time kind of, taking some bumps and bruises a little bit and learning, but also some good things, some bad things. Let's dive in. Guys, we're going to grade Kenny, and then we're also going to grade the rest of the offensive staff and the defensive staff. Hod Rabino, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would give Kenny Dillingham a B grade. Like you said, he really is learning on the job. Some 4th down calls were like, I really sure about that one. And they did come to bite him at times. But I think you definitely have to give him a lot of kudos for taking the play calling over Bo Baldwin, the offensive coordinator. That was absolutely the right move at the right time. And again, you look at USC, Colorado, and the Cal game, you're seeing almost a total different offense. The offensive staff as a whole, I mean, maybe a B minus. I mean, sure, they've been ravaged by injuries, and again, the play calling has been an issue. So you have to take some kind of grain of salt over here with their grade. But I would say just B minus for the entire offensive staff. B for Kenny Dillingham.
I got to go with an A for Dillingham for the simple fact that he's been so transparent with everybody on how things are going. He's been honest, and he's let us all know as fans, as media members. And because of that alone, like the situation with Bo Baldwin, like Hod brought up, I mean, he had to do it, right? He had to put himself in that, what a lot of people would think is an awkward position. He was able to get through that and look at how much better the offense is performing. And he's done it without having to throw shade in any particular direction. So I got to give Kenny an A. The offensive staff, I'm probably going to, hover around a B. And, I think that they've dealt with all the injuries and stuff like that as best as they could.
So for me, Kenny Dillingham, I'm going to give him an A-. The set of circumstances is almost insurmountable, but he's kept a positive attitude. As Chilly mentioned, he's taken responsibility, even in situations where maybe he didn't have to, because he wants to be that leader of the team. There are some calls that, yeah, people criticize, but to me, I think you have to take a lot of those risks. The rest of the offensive staff, I'll give him a C+, because we have seen some issues with, the play calling and just the offensive function as a whole. You'll hear about on our full podcast version, our total breakdown of grades. But I'm really excited about what Kenny Dillingham is doing. The rest of the offense has had just a tough set of circumstances as well.
Yeah, I think Kenny, like when you kind of throw the bowl ban, the injury streak in there, and just kind of the on the job training. I mean, he is a 33-year-old head coach, kind of feeling the way out, and a team that's going through a full rebuild. He's brought in 78 new players. There's new schemes on both sides of the ball. It's a pretty difficult situation. So I would say that there have been some missteps, but I also like the aggressiveness that he's had, and especially with the play calling. Kind of like the season doesn't really matter in terms of wins, losses with the bowl ban. So let's go for it. Let's see what we can do. I appreciate that. So I'm going to give him a B+. Offensively, I think it's a little bit tougher because, again, with the injury issues that we've talked about with the offensive line, the quarterback injuries, even some of the playmaker spots, it's pretty tough. So I would say probably a B at this point, maybe a B- because I do think that there's some issues there. All right, so like switching over onto the defensive side of the ball, obviously much better and more consistent play on the defense than we saw on the offense overall. Chilly, get us started. What are your thoughts on the defense?
This is my honor roll, guys. A. I think that we are giving the defensive staff an A. Love what Amy has done on the defensive line. Regal has been spectacular with special teams. Cooper with the linebackers and Carrington with those DBs. A. These guys are a good group. Give them an A.
I'm going to take it a step further. A+. I mean, I know that a 1-5 record, you're going like, what the heck? I mean, this can't be a good defense. You look at the box scores, you look at the game film, you look at the stats. This defense is playing as best as it can under extremely, really tough circumstances. You guys talked about the punting issues. You talked about the offensive issues. This defense has been placed in one tough spot after another, after another, after another. They deserve nothing less than an A+.
I'm going to go a little bit lower. If you could call me a hater, but I'm going to go A-. I'm still staying in the A range here. Obviously, you have to be incredibly impressed with what the defensive line, especially the quarterback pressure, is doing. We didn't see any of that last year. A lot of new faces, a lot of new players, obviously new coaches. They are getting it done. You're pleasantly surprised with everything that the defense is doing. The only thing that dings it a little bit is this team has not found a way to generate any turnovers. You can almost say that they haven't gotten any. They just have the one. So that is the blemish. If they can clean that up over the second half of the season, we're looking at that A+ range. Again, you have to be tremendously pleased with everything the defense is doing, again, with the exception of not generating turnovers.
Yeah, you got to give them an A. I mean, turnovers are there's like turnover luck involved, and they're doing everything that you need to do as a defense. They've been mostly consistent against the run. There have been a couple of times where they've been gashed, but I think that you can be traced back to the depth issues there and just kind of, wearing down over the course of a game. But the pass rush has been a revelation. Prince Dorba, BJ Green, the Charlie Regal and Vince Amy leading that group up front. Really impressed there. The linebackers have been through a little bit of a gauntlet in terms of their depth and some guys just not being available, but still pretty consistent play there. The back end and the secondary, pretty good as well. Brian Ward has been one of the top assistants. I was the Jimmy Royals Award top assistant. I mean, I like to see his name get up there because there's been some difficult circumstances overall for the Sun Devil defense. But week in, week out, they give this team a chance to win, and that's really all you can do. And this offense has not put themselves or not helped the defense out in the slightest bit. I mean, you had an 8 turnover game against Fresno State. The special teams with the punting woes. They've been put in some bad positions, but ultimately, for the most part, have rose to the challenge time and time again. This is a legitimately good defense. No qualifier needed. No asterisk. I think, this is the Sun Devil defense that's going to be that's already amongst the best in the conference. Now they got some challenges down the stretch, but if they're able to get some guys healthy back for those big games, I think they'll be in good shape going forward. Welcome back to Speak of the Devils. Now, Joe, 6 games into the season, ASU's at a much-needed bye week. Good time to take stock of kind of everything that's transpired so far. Now, we are both thinking that this is a team that could come into this year and perhaps make a run at 500 if things fell the right way, but almost immediately that was kind of derailed. A lot of injuries. I think injuries right now are kind of the biggest storyline so far. And right now you have a 1-5 record, and you can say that, like we have talked about, you're almost getting some wins. You're putting yourself in position to wins, but ultimately the win-loss record does not reflect kind of that quality.
And it starts, at the top with the offense. If you have such significant injuries, repeated injuries at quarterback and offensive line, I don't care who you are. You're not going to be all that successful. I'd like to do the research or have somebody else do it. That would be wonderful to see how many teams, how many major college teams this year or in recent history, or heck, even in years span worth of time, have started 3 different quarterbacks over a 4-game stretch, have had so many holes in the offensive line. These are not excuses. These are reasons. So that's really difficult to battle through, but you're starting to see at least a little bit more continuity with Trenton Bourguet there healthy at quarterback.
Yeah, and so I think that continuity has been pretty key, as well as the decision by Kenny Dillingham to take over play calling duties from Bo Baldwin, the offensive coordinator. We've seen in recent weeks that the offense has been putting up points since that that dramatic shutout loss to Fresno State. But one of the things that I really have been mostly encouraged is that under Dillingham, the playmakers are getting the ball a lot. Elijah Badger is being fed. You've seen guys like Melquan Stovall, Geo Sanders, Jalen Conyers when he's been in the lineup, getting the ball a lot and in a lot of creative ways. And now this is a lot of scheming kind of around the deficiency along the offensive line, with so many guys in that offensive line really beat up, and maybe that unit gets healthy after the bye. But given the personnel situation, you have to be creative. And so far, getting the ball to your most explosive players seems like a pretty good formula.
Yeah, you have to be creative given those injuries and availability issues. And I think you also have to be creative when you have a season that just is not going as you wanted it. And that started from even before the first game was played, with the postseason ban being announced. So when you have all that put together, then yeah, you have some experimentation, you have some risks that have been taken. You've seen quite a bit of that. Some have paid off and been exciting, some have not and been frustrating, but these are decisions that you have to make, because you can't just have a status quo, bland style of ball out there when you have a team, again, that's just trying to get the fans rallied up to have some sort of joy in this season, really just survive through and get on to the next year.
And flipping over to the defense, I think the defense has made a statement that it is legitimately good. We saw throughout spring and fall camp that under defensive coordinator Brian Ward, this could be a pretty good unit. They were very aggressive. They're attacking very kind of chaotic in a good type of way of bringing the attack to the opposing offense. And through the first half of the season, they've played some pretty good offenses and they've had pretty good results. The pass rush especially has been explosive. They've already exceeded last year's sack total. The tackles for loss numbers have been good. The one area they're just not getting the job done, and it's kind of weird, is that despite all the general success they've had on defense, they're not generating a whole lot of turnovers. But overall, this is a unit that is put that week in, week out, puts the Sun Devils in position to win.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're sacking the quarterback at a pretty high rate. You can't just get a couple fumbles forced here and there. That'd be wonderful. But yeah, the defense has really stepped up. It's like we talked about multiple times. It's interesting that the offense took a lot longer to come around than the defense. We figured it'd be the other way around heading into this season. So there's some definite high points there as well. But the second half of the schedule, you're going to have a few teams on there, the Washingtons, the Oregons of the world, that are going to bring some high-powered offense. So as good as the defense has been, and it's certainly been above average and above expectations, you're going to need them to take additional steps to try to be successful in this second half.
Yeah, you just hope that they are going to be able to kind of continue to carry the burden as the offense continues to find an identity and gets healthy, and even the defense as well, getting a little bit banged up. As we close out, Joe, overall thoughts on just kind of what this first half of the season has been like for you, kind of relative to expectations, and kind of to tie it into our podcast episode. What kind of letter grade would you give the ASU for the first half?
I would say, a D plus. I can't be too favorable because you are 1-5. It's been a long time since that's happened. You had a blowout, shutout loss at home. Things have looked a little bit better the past few games, but overall, 1-5. You still just can't be thrilled about it.
For me, I'm grading on a curve a little bit because there has been such a wave of injuries at crucial positions, quarterback, and especially I think most pronounced, the offensive line that's really hampered the Sun Devils. While I do think the defense has been good in spite of personnel losses week in and week out, the offense is still kind of coming along a little bit. So I'm going to give them a B minus. And again, greatly on a curve. If they were full strength with these results, the grade would be far more harsh. But overall, I think kind of making do in a very difficult year, and of course the bowl ban to begin. I think they're doing okay at this juncture. And right after the break, we're going to be coming back with what we want to see from the Sun Devils over the last 6 games.
Welcome back to Speak of the Devils. We've given our evaluations, some grades, some hot takes, if you will. So let's shift things. Talk about that to-do list. What does Arizona State need to do in these final 6 games of the season to make it the best season it possibly can be? As we know, of course, we've known this for a while now, there will be no postseason no matter what happens, but there still is a lot to salvage in this season to make it meaningful and then build on that get into year 2 under Kenny Dillingham, and of course ASU in the Big 12 Conference in 2024. The first thing for me is to keep the energy that you've had of late. There have been some frustrations. There obviously have been losses, but you've seen energy. You've seen 2 consecutive sellout games at Mountain America Stadium. It's the first time that's happened since 2007. That means something. You want to keep that going. I don't necessarily expect every single game to be sold out, but you want to see some excitement with the fans. You want to see some excitement, of course, within the team, within the coaching staff, just so that whatever happens over the course of these last 6 games, it is the best possible product, the most entertaining possible product that you can have, and most importantly, builds hope for the future.
A big way to kind of keep that momentum, that energy, and that trend line moving in the right direction, I think, in this bye week is to get healthy. Just simply get some bodies back, especially along that injury-ravaged offensive line. You get some of those big guys back in the trenches. That it should help the offense get going a little bit more and keep that momentum that you had over these last couple of weeks going and perhaps translate into wins.
Yeah, and Brad, I know that we're both big on this next one, is getting the run game back going again, and that could be a direct product of getting health on that offensive line. There are some bodies within the reports that we've heard so far. They're getting some players that might be back here sooner rather than later, to where you might have some greater health on this roster. If you can get Cam Scadaboo and the others going at a higher clip on the ground, of course, Scadaboo has been doing it all in every capacity, but the run game itself certainly can stand for improvement. You get some health there. That could be something we see in the back half of the schedule.
Yeah, Cam Scadaboo needs some help. DeCarlos Brooks was really effective over the first couple of weeks of the season. He's unfortunately been out. I mentioned the offensive line has just been really hit so hard by the injury bug. They've been pretty good in pass protection, but the run game has not been there. Kenny Dillingham said that he wants to be a guy that calls plays that are kind of emphasize the run, but just kind of the nature, the banged up nature of this team. He's been kind of leaning into the strength of the team, which is currently through the air. But if you can have a balance there, that's going to be a big step forward for the Sun Devils down the stretch.
Defensively, I'm thrilled with just about everything I've seen from them, quite frankly. It is a massive improvement from what we saw last year and from what we really expected from this year. The main area that's been a deficiency is the inability for this team to generate turnovers. Only 1 so far. Sometimes those are luck plays. Sometimes those are ones you can't necessarily just coach up and draw up and tell someone to go create a turnover. That said, you still need to do more in that regard. You can't just have a single turnover in 6 games. That is unacceptable. I'm sure, obviously, the defensive staff knows that. That's an area I want them to capitalize on here in the second half of the season.
1 turnover over 6 games is wild, and especially when you factor in they've been pretty much good in every other area, and especially the areas that usually kind of translate themselves into turnover generation. They've been pressuring the quarterback at a really excellent rate, especially when compared to last year. You know, they've already exceeded last year's total in sacks. Even when they're not bringing down the quarterback, they're making his life miserable and bringing the pressure. Quarterback hurries and those mistakes. Ultimately, I think that you're gonna see this much better numbers in that regard. Players going to get more comfortable in the defense. Maybe some bad luck, but also I think the guys get more comfortable. Those turnovers will come.
I also want to see the tight ends get a little bit more involved than they have been. On our podcast version, you will hear some great insight from Hod Rabino on the tight end group and why there have been some struggles to date so far. Jalen Conyers has first-round NFL potential. We want to see that on the field in action. Hopeful that his second half of the season maybe mimics last year's, where he came on the scene in the late stages of the 2022 season. Maybe these final few games will be similarly advantageous for Jalen Conyers down the stretch.
Yeah, getting those tight ends going will be a big part of getting the final key, I think, is just turning those almosts into dids, because ASU has almost won these last couple of weeks, and they just have not yet found that way to play well enough to win and actually bring home the W along with that. The defense has been playing well. The offense has been better in recent weeks. And so at some point, that thing's going to click, and those almost are going to turn into a big W for them.
That's a huge thing because, yeah, there's not a ton at stake this season with the postseason ban in place, a team that's got a lot of roster turnover, but you got to collect some wins, maybe steal some wins, especially that one at the very end of the season, again, to keep some momentum going from this season to next year.
All right, so make sure you do download our full podcast version with guest Chilly and Hod Rabino, available everywhere you get your podcast, and join us next week, same time, same channel, as we preview ASU's battle in Seattle.